Welcome to Little Bits of TLC, the podcast for educators by educators. And this season, we're doing something a little different. In this Ask Me Anything season, we're going behind the scenes to explore the story of TLC itself. Hosted by Flora Yao, Matthew Hayes, and Cass O'Hara, each episode sits down with TLC founder Heather Bolchko to unpack how it all started, where it's headed, and what she's learned along the way. So whether you're new to TLC or you've been with us from the beginning, this season is all about curiosity, connection, and a journey so full of twists and turns and brilliance, even Heather's still catching up. This is Little Bits of TLC. Looking for something that actually fits your life? TLC University is here for that. Each week, we spotlight something different. A webinar with real-world insights, a hangout-style interview, and a hands-on workshop or a Q&A where we answer your questions. It's flexible, it's self-paced, and most come with CEUs. So whether you're looking to grow, reflect, or just listen in, there's something here for you. And it's all in one place. university.thresholdlearning.org. That's where you'll find show notes, professional blogs, a full catalog of ACE-accredited courses, and downloadable resources. It all just keeps growing. So whether you're walking the dog, commuting, or taking a breather between the daily grind, TLC University meets you where you are. Head to university.thresholdlearning.org and check out what's new this week. See you then.
All right, so we're back with another episode of Ask Me Anything. This is our summer series. I'm Flora. I've been here since the beginning, so I kind of know the ins and outs of everything. And I'm here with Cass. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Cass O'Hara. I'm new. I'm new to the whole thing, so quite the opposite of Flora. So I'm getting to know Heather a little bit more than I have in the past. I'm a current BCBA trainee with Heather. I'm also a teacher with one of TLC's nonprofit district partners, and I'm partnering with the nonprofit for some hopefuls and some dreaming for the next school year. I'm excited to see where TLC and Heather and the whole team can take me with them. So very excited to learn more about Heather.
We're very excited to have you here. And today, Miss Heather, we are asking you, who even are you?
I feel like that's the $1 million question, because anybody who gets any little bits and pieces of my story is like, wait, what? Like, how does that connect? Like, it is not a straight line at all. So I am absolutely relying on all the things you know about me and Cass's curiosity to lead this conversation.
Perfect. Let's start with this. So why did you choose the career path that you're on? Tell us kind of how you got into it, how it started, how you got here.
Yeah. So my backstory, if you take me back into high school, I did not see myself graduating high school. I grew up in a really tiny town, very blue collar, military, coal mine, steel mill, like graduation. You could make bank at 16. You really didn't need a diploma. And so my family was very strong in the sense of like, no, you're going to graduate, like you will finish. But the reality when I look back between like 16, 17, 18 years old, most of my friends were dropping out or making all kinds of other choices. And it was really like part of a school psych. It was like a psychology elective, one of like the only electives we could take in our small town. And I took it as a junior. And as part of that course, you had to do kind of like practicum type of thing. And you could either do it in a local elementary school because you could walk a few blocks down to the elementary, or you could do that with a special ed classroom in our building. And so that was with low incidence. So think like Down, cerebral palsy, cognitive impairments. And there is just something about walking into that room. It does not matter if I was there first period, non back third period. Every single time I would open that door, they're like, Heather, right? So like literally I was showing up to school because that's how I was greeted at school, right? Like I had a purpose, I had a reason. By the end of my senior year, I was effectively not going to any classes, and would just turn in my work before school. And I would go down and effectively like student teach and co-teach in that classroom. And that's truly what I attribute like to me actually graduating in the first place, is really just like that population and seeing, you know, the impact that could be made there, and quite honestly enjoying it way better than all the AP classes and stuff I was taking. And so I would do my work, turn it in, and then like, I don't know, officially or appropriately skip classes to go spend time all in this bedroom. And so for me, when you get to graduation, it's like, okay, now what? I'm like, well, I've already been doing this. I guess I could just keep doing it, right? So then it's like, okay, I guess I'm going into sped. I had some friends at the time who challenged that decision quite a whole lot because they thought that I was capable of other things, and that actually I had a good friend of mine tell me, "Why would you waste your life on that? Like,
Mm,
that's so not worth it." And for me, I'm like, man, but look at all the different kinds of skills that I get to use. And like, it's always like something different. And there's always another like problem to solve. And it's never just like, I never get bored with it.
Mhm.
And that was just a couple years in. So that's how I landed going into, like, my undergrad, in special ed, is because
Mhm.
honestly, like, that's what got me to graduate high school, and I was like, "If I can do it for a couple years, I can probably do it for a career." But I will say only a couple years into my undergrad, I was, going home for, like, winter break and all that stuff, and I was starting to realize that the rate of progress in that population was not going to be one that was actually going to sustain me,
mm,
professionally. Like, I was still teaching the same guys how to write their name. I was still teaching basic counting. I was still teaching, like, there's just some foundational skills, but the retention, and then, like, of the student, and then the repetition that was required of the staff, I was like, "Oh, I don't know that I'm actually built for this." But
mm,
simultaneously, I got into, my undergrad program, that was called a community of teachers. And so the way they had built the program is that you have to spend one full day or 2 half days in a classroom every week. And, it was built as like a longer on-ramp into student teaching. So you didn't just walk in cold to do student teaching for a semester and then walk out, that you actually had some kind of like gradual release, additional practice. It was super cool. Like, I am still now, decade plus later, looking back, not like I did not comprehend how far ahead of their time my undergrad training
mm,
was. But I got in my freshman year, which nobody knows what they're doing next year, next semester. Like, no one's taking a pre-student teacher 2 or 3 years in advance. Like, that's just not
right.
happening. And so I was trying to find a placement, couldn't find one. If I couldn't find a placement, I was gonna end up dropping from the program until I could actually get a placement. And
Hmm.
one of the profs that didn't love me very much, was just like, "Well, you can go to juvenile hall. They're always looking for people." I was like, "Great, done. If that's how I stay here, like, I'm game. Let's go."
Hmm.
And they were always looking for people. And quite honestly, that's where I found EBD. Like, I didn't know emotional behavioral, mental health disorders. Looking back, I could tell you exactly in my middle school and my high school exactly where those classrooms were,
Hmm.
but I had no idea what they were or who they served or how they operated or anything like that. And then working in juvenile hall, I was like, oh man, like, these guys are making like, they are making choices and they have these stories, and the rate of change was really fast.
Hmm.
So I could see myself investing such similar skills that I had been investing in the low incidence population,
Mhm.
but I was seeing that rate of change and seeing that like immediate, life change impact in the work that I was doing. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And so from there out, it's been like emotional, behavioral, mental health, like all that, all the way through my entire career. But that's literally like, it is because of my low incidents. Like, when I go home, I got my two guys, Jake and Jacob. Like, they are my people. And that is who, when I go home, that is who I spend time with, and catch up and see what's up. But they are from that classroom. And they are probably a couple of the only reasons that I still go home at this point.
Mm,
But yeah, so it's truly because of them in their classroom that I even started into special ed. And
Hmm.
it was kind of because of a spiteful professor, that I landed juvenile hall and found DBD. And then I've just sort of dabbled back and forth between the two, in different seasons of my career since then. But yeah.
it's interesting to hear you say, that I landed it, that you landed it when the professor, presented it in a way that it was like, well, no one ever wants to do that, so that's always open, right? And it's interesting and it's telling about you, too, and who you are as a person, not as an opportunist necessarily, but as someone who says, like, everyone deserves a shot, and while it's confusing to people like us, right, that people would opt out of helping those kind of students, even if
Mhm.
they're in juvenile hall, and so I think it's kind of beautiful when those opportunities arise and, there are people that are like, "I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole," but you're like, I'm in, duh, let's go," and I think that that's telling about the type of person that you are too, and it makes a lot of sense seeing where you are now, that it's less of I'm an opportunist and more of I'm not scared to do the work that people aren't willing to because it is purposeful, it is meaningful, and it impacts people that especially the people that others aren't willing to work with. They deserve a shot too. And not everybody holds that perspective, which is unfortunate, but it's the people that do hold that perspective that kind of propel society in general forward. So it's cool, and it's making some sense here, Heather.
Well, I was student teaching, and so I was student teaching in an ED middle school room, and the teacher was coming up on retirement at some point, and he was rough around the edges. Like he is the old school BD classroom teacher, right? Like cut with grit kind of guy.
Oh yeah.
And he told me, he's like, always be where nobody else will be.
Mm.
Right,
Oh,
like, that's where your guys will
advice.
be, that's where the work will be, like, always be where nobody else will be, wants to be, would be, that kinda stuff. He's like, "You will
Mm.
always be in the right place at the right time
Yeah.
if you're looking at your profession in that way."
Mm.
And then I'd taken that back and I just had a conversation with my mom, and she's like, "Heather, you were built that way." She's like, she could give me stories from, like, elementary school, like, all these, like, Wayback Machine things that, like, I don't have recollection of her. She's like, "You were always the one that, like, you would go pull the kid who's on the side of the wall into whatever activity's going on," or, like, she's like, "You were always just drawn to the outliers." Like, that's just
Mm.
how you were made from the beginning of time. I think she even pulled, like, a couple preschool examples of things, like, just,
Aw.
like, that's just who I am, how I've kind of entered life, and that's then now kind of professionally, I just get to do that, which is honestly some of the I don't know, like, I don't know if I'm, like, fast forwarding with how y'all wanna have this conversation, but, like, even into TLC and, like, the folks that I get to, like, have the privilege of working with, it's still, like, we're all little, like, Island of Misfit Toys style, like, no one of us has a straight line from where we started to
Mhm.
where we are and where we're headed, like, this is just a pit stop along the way, and we're trying to figure it out together, and, um, I don't see our team any different than any students I've gotten to work with or, it's just making it make sense together.
I think I just said something to you yesterday actually about, and I think it's quite beautiful in anybody that can do this, but that when someone doesn't hold humanity and a person's humanity against them or views them as less than because of it, that imperfect nature that, I mean, isn't inevitable, and the definition of being a human, right? That your expectations aren't that people are anything other than human, and so when they inevitably show you their humanness, right, where things don't go
Mhm.
perfectly, you're like, yeah, okay. That's to be expected, and
Right.
I think that's why we find ourselves in these rooms and, with the people that and in the rooms that people don't wanna be in. Um, and that's why we still do it, and it seems it's why you still do it is because you're finding beautiful people because you set aside the things that people would, um, push them away for. So, and it seems like it's written in who you are, which is really cool.
Laura
Cass.
knows it. It's like
Yeah,
since
I
the
was gonna
beginning of
say.
time, I was like, I say humans are messy on a good
Yeah.
day, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, to anticipate or expect anything else is ludicrous, right? Like,
Sure.
Mhm.
Mhm.
humans are messy. Sorry, Flora, I don't wanna cut you off.
No, no, I was gonna say, Cass, you haven't even known her that long, and you nailed it with the how she'll just say, "Yeah, okay." The amount of times I've heard her say, "Yeah, and okay," like you're human, it's fine. Like yeah, you hit it right on the head. Yep.
Well, and Flora, I think I have a question for you actually. Being on the receiving end of that, all
Yeah.
right, and someone who has worn a lot of hats for
Mhm.
Heather and has kind of
So
walked this
many.
journey with
Oh my
her,
gosh.
not only as her friend, and while that's where it began, but obviously someone who has been essential to TLC.
Mhm.
How is that on the receiving end, right? Like for me, I mean, in the very brief time, I'm like, man, I do not want to disappoint this person.
Mm.
Not even for, like, personal reasons to get me further or anything like that, but genuinely because this person is this way, I really don't wanna let them down, and I'm ready to be honest about that, but, like, what's that like for you? I think having known her for so long.
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, I definitely for myself, I tend to be very like you said, I don't want to disappoint this person. That's how I am with like everyone. But I've known her so
Mm.
long that I know that probably the only way I could disappoint her is to like try to disappoint her. Like,
Mm.
You gotta work
It
on
had to
like
be
it.
intentional, right?
yeah, like just she knows me really well and she knows like what I'm good at and she always has a way of like, oh, Flora's good at that. I bet she could do this.
Mm.
Whether it's like in our personal lives or it's in TLC. And that's how I have have done all the things I have at TLC, because she sees a need and she knows who could fill it. She's very good at that. So she sees a need and she'll be like, "Oh, I should reach out to so and so. They know how to do this." And like, look at us doing this right now. Like she knew she'd be good at it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's great.
Very, very cool. So it's less about like necessarily the jobs that she's kind of been in, or the position she's been in, but the perspective I think that she's gleaned from, and sorry, Heather, I'm talking about you like you're not right here.
You're good.
Um, but but the perspective that you take into any challenge, right, or any situation is the one where humans are beautiful and they deserve a shot. And what can I do with the opportunities that I have or the things that I'm holding, right, to support that person and to continue to grow themselves. And it's really, really interesting to see how that is intertwined really in everything that you're doing or have done so far. So you went from being, let's say, in school, in high school, finding yourself in the juvenile uh center, and then you said you did, a middle school class, is that right?
Yeah, student teaching was middle school, and
Okay.
honestly, like, I love middle school. Like, everybody's a little crazy in middle school, like, I'm so
Yeah.
here for that, right? So, everybody's trying to figure themselves out, does not matter what labels you do or don't have, so
Mm.
even the kids who are carrying some really heavy stuff, honestly, they can hide in plain sight pretty darn well because
Yeah.
everybody's just a little off. So I love middle school, like, complete and total, right?
That is a
Uh
rare perspective. That is rare, which is good, it's good, but I feel like a lot of people are like, "You gotta be a little off for middle school," and I like that, right? Like,
Oh, yeah, you
we
gotta
like
be a
those kind
certain
of
kind of
people.
person, that's for sure. But I think there's just, like, this beautiful moment in development that happens in middle school too, and, I mean, I'm working in juvenile hall. I'm an undergrad, and I am maybe a year or 2, like, some of my guys were older than me when I was teaching
Mm,
them GED prep, right? And I'm listening to their stories being like, "Dude, like, you got booked recently, but the choices you were making goes back," right? And so I find middle school to be that nice sweet spot where, you're kinda grown, kinda, you know what you need to know about life, and you're starting to exert that over kind of your
mm,
choices, but you're also still a little eyes wide open.
yeah.
And that, like, curiosity and trying to genuinely make sense of the world, that we see very much, more so in elementary school is still there in
Mhm.
middle school. And
Yeah.
so I've always loved that little sweet spot where you're starting to make grown decisions, but you're still open to
Valuable
trying to
and
figure out, right?
yeah.
And then, like, I worked in alternative ed, and I had the caseload of all upperclassmen. And so those were guys that were of senior age or credit. And I was so nervous taking that position. Like, I was excited about it because it was a little bit of, like, a back to my roots from some of the GED
Sure.
prep work I had been doing. Um, but man, I was like, these guys are way more moldable than I gave them credit for.
Mhm.
But it's needing to be in an environment, in a situation where they actually know that they are seen and that they can show up as their full selves. And then
Yeah.
you start seeing that little boy tucked inside of these grown men who've made very adult decisions, and, like, they're still trying to figure out the world and make sense of things, right? So, like, for me, I don't much care, and I think for me, because it's, middle school or high school or all of us as adults still trying to figure out what the heck we're doing with life, like, that's just sort of like the human experience, and I'm kinda
Mm.
just here for it. If
Yeah.
that's professionally or not or what, like, I think, yeah, I'm just kinda along for the ride in seeing um, where those stories go, and, whatever part of their story I get to be part of, if I've, spurred them in that direction for whatever is next, like, cool. I'm here for it.
So you you're back at your roots, right? And you're working with a population that is a little bit more familiar. And somehow you have gotten from that position to the one that you're in now. And so, were there certain certifications that you had to start getting, or what was that first step for you?
Yeah, I think for me, the realization that I was probably not going to retire from the classroom, um, is what pushed me forward. Because again, like, I
Mm,
didn't see myself graduating from high school, so I had my bachelor's, like, I was
right.
killing it. Like, I was doing way better than I had anticipated. I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, that can be my ceiling. I'm happy with it. And so I'm not even joking. Like, my entire academic trajectory is because someone saw something in me and was like, "Hey, have you thought about?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't." Because
Mm,
like I don't see that as, part of my trajectory. Like, I'm good where I'm at. I'm not complacently good with where I'm at, but I'm not like I'm gonna go and like shoot for the moon, right? So I think for me, it was what about my guys, the work that I'm doing, do I love?
mhm.
And let's keep that. And what are the things about my work that are making me feel like I don't want to retire from this job? And how can we
Yeah.
toss that? Right. And so that became the sifting for me. And, Flora has walked these things with me. And so she knows like I've got different ways of being like, I need to see how much I'm actually good for this job and this job is good for me. And
Mm,
I think kind of walking through, I actually started this back, I think my first or second job actually. I did a color coded calendar
And that is
and
one of
it
my
was,
first memories of you,
uh,
is talking about that, like, "I'm doing this over a couple of months. Should I stay? Should I go?" I remember that, yes.
yeah. So, okay. So if you're not familiar with this, color coded calendar for me is your basic red, yellow, green, print out a monthly calendar at the beginning of the month, right? At the end of every day, I would sit down and pick a color, right? So some days it was dark green, super bright, like this is a freaking awesome day. Other
uh,
days is like dark red. I actively thought about quitting or I looked up other jobs, right? Like, and then I could see across a month how it was shaking out for me, right? And a lot of times I felt so drawn in certain moments that I knew I was overlooking some of the rough stuff. And so I started using that calendar as a way to say, okay, so in my career, what are those green and even yellow? Like yellow's like as whatever, right? But like green days are like this is why I do what I do. And red days are like, why am I doing this? Right. So like trying to catch both sides. And then yellow's like,
mhm,
that's a normal day, whatever. I started doing that with my career, not just the day. Of being like, what are the things that is turning this day green? What are the things that are turning this day red? And that started to become kind of like my unofficial sifting. And I will tell you, I have done that in every job I have had um, since the jump, right? So if I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, I don't know if this is a fit for me anymore. I don't know if I'm good for them, if they're good for me. Like, I don't know. I'll just start running those calendars and just see what comes up. And what I've learned over the years is I can have a very red and mostly red, couple yellow, and one green day in an entire month calendar, and I'm good. Like, I am fully sustained and I am in it for the long haul. But that's also been like a personal check for me too, to be like, oh, maybe this is not as good as it is in my mind, right? Like
mm,
when you look
mhm,
at the data would tell you a different story. Um, but yeah, so I think as I was doing that, I was actually doing that in alternative ed. And there was also some shift around administration and some perspectives around programming and some of that stuff too, where I was just like, this is no longer feeling like it's a fit for me. And I had started down the road of my master's in educational psychology, behavior analysis. I say it was as a way to blow the walls off of my classroom. I was no longer bound to students. I was no longer even bound to humans. If I wanted to do, animal training or whatever, like there were so many applications of the behavioral sciences that for me, I was like, this gives me options. And I
mm.
think I have only ever leveraged education as a way to give me options. It's never been just like a checkbox or a stepping stone, even how I picked my electives in my undergrad. Like,
It's interesting. I'm gonna pause you for a second because it's interesting you're saying this, and I'm thinking about how you grew up in you know, a coal I think you said coal mining and those sort of things, those very,
mm,
um, vocational kind of you get it, right? You make bank, like you said, at 16
mhm.
years old, and you don't move from that job, and so I'm gonna say this, so take it a little bit lightly, but what gave you the audacity to think that you could be switching jobs this much? What do you think that was
Yeah.
that propelled that, like, kind of incentive in your brain?
I don't know. So this is something that I think has only started becoming like a realization of mine in the past few years.
Mm,
So my biological family is scattered across the country, and has immigrant roots. Farmers in the Depression didn't have much, and within
mm,
only a few generations, were able, like from hard decisions of my, grandparents, great grandparents, right? Um, that they were kind of like, I am making those choices to not have where I am now be where I am in the future.
Yeah.
And so they had to figure it out, right? I think from stories I've heard, my, great grandparents were kind of like, we don't have an education and you need to. And so there was just that push. So even if you just make it through high school or make it through, make it further than what I did.
Mm.
And that from the stories I've put together for my family seems to be a through line, where it's just like wherever I made it, the next generation should go farther.
Mm.
And so when I look at even like my parents or, aunts and uncles or just like learning about stories of my family, some of it is just like, well, just be useful, like go do something useful. And that doesn't mean that you have to pick that when you're 16, 17, 18 years old. If when it changes, change it, right? And like just go keep doing the thing, whatever the thing is. And so I think there's always been kind of like this, I don't know, like that openness again. Like if you're doing what you're meant to do, if you are, serving in some capacity, if you are meeting some kind of a need, right? And that's a fit for you in your
Mm.
like professional and personal moment in life, then it sounds like a great plan, right?
That's cool. That's cool. Sorry, it was really, really interesting, how you kind of got there. And I guess I went with more of a stereotypical. I grew up in a rural town too, where most people, if you do leave, you come back, and that's where you raise your children, and you do the same thing for the rest of your life that you picked when you were in high school.
Yep.
Um, I am several steps away from that myself. So, um, so it was really cool to see that this kind of what sounds like a familial perspective has propelled you to continue to keep asking questions and um all the way to the point where you're at right now. You're getting a master's in um educational and behavior sciences, and how you can now apply that to anybody, and it opens your world in a different way, which is really, really neat. So um so you continued on with your master's, and then what came from there?
Yeah, so I was super picky doing my master's, because I had had a couple of interactions with folks that I didn't necessarily feel like were a fit with education. And I didn't want to accidentally stumble myself into training that aligned with some of those, what I perceived to be missteps. And so when I was looking for my master's program, I was super picky about I wanted ed psych. I don't want clinical psych. I don't want psych. I just want ed psych. I want folks that know the science
Mm.
and they see the science in like its purest strength form, right? Like, but they're also totally cool with applying it in such highly applied, super messy, way more variables that you could ever control on a good day, right? Like
Mm.
all of that kind of a way. And I wanted that in my training because I've also looked at it like I'm not here to waste any time. Like I'm here to learn, I'm here to do the thing all the way in, right? And so I
Mm.
wanted my profs to be able to speak to what does it look like to run this in a classroom. And that also meant that when I was then picking a BCBA, to help me through my clinical hours, I needed them to be able to wrap their head around education, alternative ed, all the different types of, ways of different applications of the science and to see that it actually was the science. And I was so lucky that my prof saw it, my coursework led it, like that was just through and through. And I did. I landed a supervisor out of New York City,
Wow.
who did a lot of work internationally. I've done a lot of work internationally, and my hope was to be able to leverage my master's experience to kind of open some doors in the international space as well. And she was doing a lot of work with an international organization and leveraging the science not only in how they were serving folks abroad, but how they were serving the people who were serving the folks abroad too. And so it opened up so many cool conversations. She helped me get through my last few years and like into my first like board certified behavior analyst role, through freaking out sitting for the exam and all the things that you're trying to make sense of right now too, right? But like she was so cool in the way that she could take a moment and connect it to the big words and see it in the bigger picture, but then drill it
Mm.
down into the science and could do it all
Mhm.
simultaneously. I was like, that. I want that. I'm so
Yeah.
thankful that I landed that. To have that person walking me through those things. She was then the one who was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about getting a doctorate?" I'm like, "No." Like,
That's hilarious.
absolutely
Yeah.
have not. Like, why would you ever think that? I would never.
Mhm.
But it was actually from our conversations. We were leveraging some of there's a big name in the social work field that has done a lot of work with just communities that are kind of up against stuff and they're trying to make sense of how their current life doesn't have to be their future life and what are some of those decisions and how does that work out. Had been doing some research and work in that area, and so that's how I ended up looking at my first university for my doc program. Was trying to figure out how I could work with that guy. um, Long story short, couldn't. But they had another program that was on the website that I was like, oh, well, that could be an angle, right? And so applied and got into that. And that was my, first foray into academia, which up until that point, like I'm all in, right? I can learn stuff, I can do stuff, I can apply stuff, and I'm here to connect the dots between what I'm learning in my coursework and what I'm doing in my practice. And if it doesn't connect the dots, what am I doing? Um, so I think stepping into academia, I had so many things that I did not understand. Walking into that, like I like, cool, bachelor's check, master's check, like I can do this, doctorate, completely different game.
Really?
Completely different game. Long story short, because you're asking about some certificates too. So I have two ABDs. So if you're not familiar in academia, it's all but dissertation. Basically, done all the coursework for a doctorate, but have not completed the dissertation study. And part of walking through that was then also finding the gaps in some things that I had anticipated being part of my program, um, and seeing practical needs of what I needed to do in practice. And so I started collecting certificates, sort of filling the gaps
Mhm.
of the doctoral work that I was doing. So like, I know I can do research, I can do grant proposals and all the things, right? Like, I've got that, but then at the end of the day, I'm also working in systems and doing that practical work. And so a lot of my certificates, in my eyes, kind of fill the gaps of things that
Mm.
were not in my doc prep. But that's also because it's not what they were prepping us for, right? Like they were prepping us for academia and research and all that trajectory. But I've never wanted to, leave the actual practice. It's part of why I chose behavior analysis and not administration, right? Like I have the utmost respect for all of our administrators. They know that through and through.
Sure.
And I am so thankful that I do not have that job. And I respect the snot out of them for doing that job. But I
Mhm.
wanted to strategically pick a master's route that did remove me from the classroom a little bit, but would require me to continue to stay engaged with the student population with the actual practical day to day work. And in my doc experience, that was full split, right? Like they were pushing that
Mm.
academia route. And I was like, yeah, but also, right? Like I'm here for that, totally here for that. Enjoy it, nerd out over that stuff all the time. But that's not all I want, right? Like I want to also have the practical side of things. And so, yeah, that's a lot of my certificates. If it's like organizational behavior management or leadership psychology, program evaluation, like all kinds of things. I just leverage the certificates to fill in that practical gap amongst all of the, doctoral work that I was doing.
Mm.
It's interesting because I think people expect as you right, like, as you grow your education and you add on these, masters and doctorates, everyone's like, "Okay, well, you're gonna be making more money," and everyone's like, "Yes, I am." But then there's those of us that make some choices, where you're like, "Oh, somehow I said, yeah, it's okay to cut my salary in half because I can still apply, even though I'm highly educated, I can still apply this, and it needs it because the people that do have the education aren't in that field anymore, and so you kind of have to find it in you." Again, we're tying back to that kind of that essential element of who you are, where it says, "No, no, no, I see a need." That's greater than mine, right? And those really common socially acceptable reasons to move on going to tell me what to do. And I'm gonna go where the need is, if that means that's not where the money's at. And so, at least not right away. And I think that that's really fascinating because I'm sitting here, I'm writing down. I was like, wow, you all you have to do is your dissertation and then your doctorate. Like that's
I mean, I wish it was that
incredible.
easy at this
I
point.
know, yeah, but
Um, well, I
you
think
know,
like to your point, when yeah, at the end of my first doc attempt, um, it came down to me taking the same paper and applying it 3 different places. I gave it to
Mm.
my advisor, I sent it to a professional editor, and I sent it for publication. Um, and when I got all 3 of them back, it was accepted to be published, only had a few, like, minor revisions, and the editor had done some, like, grammatical fixing and, made it prettier, and my advisor had redlined it. Complete full stop, no way, no how, and that was the time that I was like, "I'm never getting out of here."
Mm.
Right, like, if I can have a peer-reviewed journal say yes and, like, give
Right.
good constructive feedback and be willing to publish it, but my advisor wasn't willing to even consider the ideas that I had
Mm.
included in it, I was like, "I don't think I'm gonna make it out of this program." And so I mean, part of, last episode, we're talking about Dr. Van Acker and, it's his fault that TLC exists. It was because at that time I was working with him when all of that stuff was going down. And he was like, we got to find you another option.
Yeah.
And it was him who basically said, nope, this is not the end of the road.
Mm.
What's next? Right. And he, started giving some ideas or, direction or whatever. And so I was like, okay, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. This isn't all of academia. There is another potential out there. And that was how I did it. I started a second doc program in ed psych, so a little bit, kind of back to my master's roots,
Mm.
and layered in program evaluation because I was doing a ton of program development work, and I loved the program eval course that I had taken as part of Doc One, and was like, man, that's just like that's hitting so many things in so many ways for me that I was like, I want to just do that, and so I started up Doc Attempt Two, fast track that thing, and like knocked out as many of those courses humanly possible as quickly as possible to get to dissertation. And the last semester in that program, was rough for us, personally, my health. I ended up having COVID in finals.
Mm.
And at the same time that my husband's trying to figure out if I'm gonna make it through COVID. Prof gave me an F. F is auto drop. And that's the end of the line. And
Mm.
so I actually was at NASA with Matthew. He and I are running this massive research study across the entire center with all these focus groups and all these things. And I am literally there doing this massive federal research project, and I get the call from the department chair saying that I had been, dismissed from the program. Um, and so I spent the next semester, like, okay, because they encouraged me, my advisor encouraged me, everybody encouraged me, like, walk the appeals process. I was like, okay, cool, I can do that, right? So
Mm.
wrote the, 50, 60 page rebuttal, which is basically like a dissertation saying, can I please
Right.
write a dissertation? And then, the day or two before, actually, Flora and I were out. We had taken a trip together when I got the email back from the university that says, we have pulled the department stance. And so that was just full case closed, full stop, completely done. And so I was like, okay, cool. Right. But not all academia is like this because quite honestly, my second doc experience is exactly like if anyone could have a doc experience like that, I would like everybody should do that. The way they were able to have, good discourse with disagreement, founded in all kinds of just different way. Like it was just like the movie-esque version of, when you have a bunch of smart people in a room and they're pontificating on all these big, ambiguous ideas, right? I was so here for that. It was so fun, genuinely enjoyed it. And so like no hate. Honestly, love the experience. And so I was like, okay, but now I know that that's out there, right? It's not
Yeah.
just my first experience. Cause if that was all that was, I'm out. Full stop. Don't care to even try.
Mm.
But then having had that second experience, I was like, okay, if that's also out here, game on. Like I can do that.
Mm.
And so I did. I started up a third doc program, lasted 2 weeks, dropped immediately. Because I was like, this is not built for me. Like there were so many things that I was just like, nope, nope, done and done. And like amongst all of this is when I started TLC. I had actually started TLC and intentionally stepped back from full time like in district consult work so that I could have time to do my dissertation. So instead of doing my dissertation, I launched TLC and wrote a rebuttal appeal to try to retain access to yeah, it was just like a wild ride. But
How
yeah,
long was that? Like that you said, like, let's say from the time you got COVID
yeah,
and NASA.
Oh, from COVID forward?
Yeah, let's say like the NASA experience, right? You get that phone call, they're
I've
like,
got
"We're gonna drop you from the program."
5 or 6 years of doc coursework, across the 2 programs,
Mm,
plus the additional certificates along the way. Um, and yeah, I think I was gearing up for year 7 when I was like, pause. And at the time, I mean, TLC started taking off and we started having some traction. So I was kind of like, you know what? Like, instead of just talking about the things, like I just get to do the things. And it was this fun merge where we could mix the heady conceptual stuff with the practical, and so we could do it really well. Like, that's
mm,
just something I'm so thankful, for the opportunities in TLC that we could just do it well. Um, but yeah, at that point, I just kinda, like, said, "Okay, pause. We'll figure this out," because it's one of those, like, I was feeling like I was on the rat race toward nowhere, and in doctoral world, no one transfers anything anywhere, and so you're starting over. So yeah, I was trying to figure out what would be uh, next, and so an option would be to go back to Doc Attempt One as a potential option. Ended up at a conference with the prof that I had hoped would be my advisor, um, and he was sounding a lot similar to the department that I had left, as opposed to kind of what I had known of him when I was in the program.
mm,
I was like, "Okay, I don't think that's gonna be a fit."
yeah,
And so I've just started exploring, you know, what are other options? There are ABD completion programs out there, but then in academia, you also have roll-offs, and so after 7 years, you start losing coursework, and I'm right up in there. And so, yeah, I don't know, I think, at this point, I've literally, like, I've taken some of these courses 2 and 3 times. So, like, the running joke is now I'm gonna pick the next doc program, based on what books are on my bookshelf. Like,
right?
been there, done that.
Right.
But the other side of it too is, like, then fine, forget it, right? Like, I'm gonna go do something in educational leadership. I'm gonna go do something in philanthropic management. I'm gonna go do something, like, I've already got all these other,
Mm,
ABD doc work stuff. So why not? Like, get creative and see what else is next. To see what other doors those opportunities may open as well.
I want to jump in and say that something about you, Heather, and you said it in all this stuff you were saying. I want to point it out because I learned this from you too,
Mm.
is how when a door closes, you do not get super duper discouraged and you're like, oh, just, you are totally one of those people that's like, let me find the next door that opens. And then that door closes and then you go find another door. And I am not like that, or I wasn't like that. I am now. I wasn't like that at all. I learned that from you of just like, just because something ends doesn't mean it's over. It means that there's probably another opportunity somewhere. Let's go find that. It's
Oh,
super
yeah.
encouraging and it's a great thing to model.
I mean, when I
um,
was going for my first BCBA job, I hadn't officially passed yet. And so I was sort of like over applying, right? Like, I had already stepped out of my classroom gig and was trying to land my first, behavior analyst gig. And because I didn't have the cert yet, different options do or don't exist yet. Yet being the key word there. But I did. I applied to almost 40 different jobs, and I got one callback.
I do remember this, yeah.
And I was like, "Well, I think that's where I'm going."
I think
Right?
it's
But
a
it wasn't
sign.
like, "What the heck?" Like, expletives, other, almost 40 applications that went nowhere. It's like, "Okay, cool. Decision made. Rock and roll. Let's go."
Yep.
Like, this is where it's headed. So it is like, for me, and yeah, Flora, thank you for calling that out. Like, it is open every door, right?
mm,
Even when I'm leaving, I'll even say, like, I try to leave open doors behind me, right? Unless
yeah,
I don't want it to be open,
right.
then I will close it. But generally speaking, like, I will try to open every door, and if the door closes, great, then not for me. Next, right?
Yeah,
And then likewise, if I'm leaving, being like, you've always got an open door here, or those kinds of things, making that very clearly known. But yeah, you're right, Flora. It is. I am not. I don't know. Put off by closed doors. It's like,
Yes.
okay, then that wasn't the answer. So what is?
Yes. And that's a fantastic like characteristic for someone to have, especially a business owner.
but yeah, a leader, right? And this
Yeah.
kind, right? Like this kind of business, because I think I've seen a lot of businesses I've been a part of where like you don't see the top dog. You just don't. Like, right? Once
Mhm.
they've started it and they put that into somebody else's hands, and all the balls are rolling, then like, cool, I'm gonna take a step back and just kind of enjoy the fruits of my labor. However, that's something that I again already learned about you, Heather, is that like I was much like Flora. I think when we met, one of our first long conversations, sorry about that. Long conversations was about how I had given up
Mhm.
ever pursuing supervision again. And that just seemed like such a foreign and silly, thought from you. You're like, but, like, but you like, we could do it though." Like, it's still something you could pursue, like, "Would you?" And I think we went in that conversation for a while, and, you kept asking, like, "Would you do it? Would you do it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I would," but, like, I'm telling you, Heather, it's not cooking for me. It's not gonna happen.
Like, I hear you,
Um
but I don't agree with you.
yeah, you're like, "No, no, I don't. No, I don't. We're just gonna keep spinning that wheel until it's the time for that wheel to land?" And I think that that's, quite fascinating and quite contagious too, where it's like, "Oh,
Mhm,
well, that one didn't work, but you know what? We're gonna keep at it until it does work at
mhm,
whatever angle it's gonna need to work at." And so it's sounding like that's again another one of those center components of who you are,
mhm,
that has gotten you here, right?
mhm.
Leading other people who are like-minded, and you said an island of misfits, right? Like we
Yeah.
are a motley crew here, and but that's what keeps I think those wheels turning too.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
I mean, like, we're recording this for summer of 2025, right? And it is such a wild moment in history, at least
Mm,
in the United States
yeah.
and honestly quite across the world. There's just some really intriguing, it's we're in an intriguing moment.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, I think talking about where did TLC come from, why does it exist, the conversation that we had with Matthew last week, and then the conversation that we get to have next week, we're talking about like who do we serve? I think
mhm,
in this moment in history, those things are the core, right? So if we know who we serve, like why we're here, what are we doing? Well, then it's easy to pivot. Right,
mhm,
because then it's not just a closed door, full stop, end of those like, end of the road. It's, "Okay, so that's not the direction, so what is?"
mm,
And I know, like, there are directors of our, districts who are, like, our nonprofit district partners, who have engaged in those questions and conversations with me for the past few months
mhm.
of just going like, "So what is next, and where does this go, and what can we
right.
do, and how can we continue to do the work," quote, unquote, "the work," whatever the work is, um and I'm not put off by more barriers and blockers and, things. It's like, okay, cool. So that's just more variables in the permutations that need to be run to creatively come up with the next direction. Because we know who we are, we know how we're built, and we know who we're here to serve. How? Now we can get creative.
Mm,
Heather, as an ever-growing person, who allows others to be ever-growing around you, which means they're fallible and all the things, right? What would your best advice be to, let's say, a younger version of you, right? Someone who isn't at the stage that you're at, but is aspiring to do the things that you're doing to impact the amount of people that you're impacting, who's willing to reach out into those populations you're willing to reach out to. What would you tell that person, to either avoid doing or to make sure they do, to ensure that they can have a pathway that's a lot like yours, where you just keep finding those opportunities and keep growing?
I love this. I really wanna hear this answer, Heather.
Me too. Honestly, like, I think we've sort of talked around it in this episode, but just don't get so stuck on the end goal or on, even to a certain extent, like the process, um and just literally just keep walking. Like, see what shows up, see what you can do with that, see if it's something you want to do something with. If not, make other choices, right? Like, but just keep walking. Like, there's nothing too big, too scary, too hard, to like be like the full stop on it. Um, but maybe that just adjusts. Like, that is the pivot. That is the, shift, right? Like, I know there are lots of parts of my story that we did not even come close to touching, in this conversation that are absolutely those moments. And like you've heard, some of them from the questions that you were asking me today. But I think as I look back through my life, bigger than just work or, education or, like professional pursuits, that it truly is just keep walking. Like the way you think it's going to pan out, if it doesn't pan out that way, that's actually okay.
Mm.
And so like not to get so stuck on that end result or, how I think that thing is going to happen and like how it's going to come through or whatever, that I don't hold that tightly. I think there was a season of my life where I was very regimented,
Mm.
um, and like to the minutia of making sure that everything was in line. And I think there's still big parts of me that does that. That's why I can break things down into smaller pieces. Task analysis is my jam, like all that stuff. But to then hinge the next step on the current step so thoroughly, I would just say don't. Right? Like just because it doesn't come through that way, in whatever, the right now or the future thing that you thought was going to be, just because it doesn't happen doesn't mean that's the full stop. It just means that that wasn't the door, right? Like, so
Mm.
that door closed or that wasn't the door, find the next one, right? And
Mm.
just keep walking. But I think that's why, like we were sort of hinting at too, like this moment in history, there's a lot of really big question marks with a lot of very unknown things. Um, and I think it is just keep walking, right?
Mm.
Like as long as we know the general, like who I am to my core and, what am I built for? Everything else, like, we can get creative, that's okay. That's why my career is not a straight line. Almost nobody at TLC has a straight line, because it's like we know who we are, we know how we're built, we know how we show up, and we will show up in those ways, in those spaces, whatever
Mm.
those are, wherever they are, however that shows up. So it truly is just keep walking.
Mm. That ties in really well to what we're talking about in our next episode. So I think we're going to stop here and Cass is going to join us and we're going to have a really great discussion. I'm so excited. So
I
we'll
look
see
forward
you
to
next
it.
time.
Yeah, see you then.
All right.
Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, consider dropping a like and follow at Threshold Learning TLC on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you like our show, share the podcast with your colleagues. A personal recommendation is by far the best way to promote the podcast. Let them know that they can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that they catch their podcast. Just be sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. You can email us at info@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. You can find everything you're looking for at thresholdlearning.org. See you there. Attention educators pursuing behavior analysis certification and universities preparing them for success. Supervision with TLC offers 100% remote fieldwork supervision designed specifically for school-based professionals. Educators can earn their hours right in their schools without leaving their classroom, all while being supported by experienced BCBAs who understand the realities of education. With month-to-month scheduling, affordable rates, and both live video and asynchronous chat, our fieldwork supervision model is designed to fit into your life, not the other way around. We also invite universities to enhance their graduate programs in partnership with our team of practicing school-based BCBAs. Our fieldwork supervision model keeps students on track for certification by helping them connect their practice to all exam domains so that they can confidently pass the exam. Explore more at university.thresholdlearning.org/supervision or email supervision@thresholdlearning.org to connect. Supervision with TLC, where educators grow into behavior analysts.